Welcome to the Sober Edge podcast, inspiration for alcohol-free living. I'm your host, Terry Patterson, functional nutritionist and This Naked Mind senior coach. The Sober Edge is a place to explore the infinite possibilities on the other side of drinking. In a culture soaked in booze, discover the wonder and joy of taking a different path. Meet real people living lives of purpose and passion, learn the truth behind the alcohol myths, and get ready to be motivated, inspired, and astounded by what is possible with the Sober Edge. Well, my guest today is such a treat for all of us. And me, as a foodie and a functional nutritionist, these are the kind of conversations that I love to geek out on. So I have with me today Dr. Brooke Scheller. She is back for a second appearance on the podcast because in the time since she first appeared, which was May of 2022, Dr. Brooke has written a book. And this is a book that is so exciting because there's so much practical wisdom and advice and really the steps on how to make this change around alcohol. So she's written a phenomenal book, How to Eat to Change How You Drink. And we have a great conversation around this holistic approach, focusing on food and nutrition and gut health. And we get into a few of the deeper topics around why community is important, taking medications, supplements, all the things that you're going to want to know. And so I am delighted to share Dr. Brooke with you again and tell you just a little bit about her. So Dr. Brooke Scheller is a doctor of clinical nutrition, the founder of Functional Sobriety, and the author of the brand new book, How to Eat to Change How You Drink, Heal Your Gut, Mend Your Mind, and Improve Nutrition to Change Your Relationship with Alcohol. Her launch of Functional Sobriety led to the development of her online community, the Functional Sobriety Network, with members around the globe. Dr. Brooke is an author and contributor to many health platforms and has been featured on websites like Forbes and Oprah Daily. You can follow her on Instagram at Dr. Brooke Scheller, and please check out her brand new book and enjoy this conversation talking all about nutrition and alcohol. Well, hey, everyone, it's Terry back with another edition of the Sober Edge podcast. And I have a special treat for you today because I have a repeat guest, and Dr. Brooke Scheller is back with us today. I think it was May of 2022 when we first connected. And Dr. Brooke, you have been on fire. So tell us what's been going on.
Well, I'm so excited to be back. So thank you so much for having me, Terry. I appreciate you. And I appreciate our early connection because you were the only other person when I kind of joined the sobriety community that was a nutritionist, right? So we have similar background in training, and we need more of this conversation around food and nutrition and its importance in the recovery and sober curious community. So I love it that I'm back. And we were just saying before we hopped on here that it was, that's close to 2 years ago now, I guess, which seems crazy, 1.5 years ago. And all during that time, I was writing my book and working on putting the finishing touches together for my book, which, depending on when this goes live, publishes on December 26th, 2023. And it's been a whirlwind for me in terms of just being a part of this conversation around sobriety and how to continue to bring these tools. I'm just so excited. And I know that you share a similar passion as I do to get to use my expertise in my area of knowledge of nutrition and marry that together with the sobriety world, which is really cool and feels like just like this fireball of passion that I wake up with every day to talk about this stuff. So glad to be back.
Yes, I'm so excited about the book. And I love the name and I love the artwork. So yeah, here we are. We're matching books. So how to eat to change how you drink. It's such a cool concept because I think it's one of the missing links. Like we expect just to change our behavior and we bypass all of these potentially supportive, hacks that are out there when it comes to nutrition. And you have done such a great job of putting this into words and step by step, really, of how important this is and actually how to do it.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And maybe we talked about this when I was on the podcast last time. I don't know how much we got into the discussion around the book, but I was 3 months into my sobriety journey in back in 2021 when I was hit by this epiphany of I have to write a book on this. And the irony is that prior to getting sober, I had actually written a textbook chapter in a textbook on complementary and integrative approaches to substance use disorders. And I wrote a chapter on nutrition and supplements for substance use disorders. And when I wrote it, I was probably like doing my edits with a glass of wine, like on the table next to me, because I was still drinking. And I always share in my story, and you read in my story in the book, that for so long, I felt like I was living a double life, right? And that is just like the ultimate example of that here I was trying to be healthy and really wanting to be healthy. Like many of us who go into the health space, we want to be healthy. We have a desire to live a healthy lifestyle, to take part in all of these healthy practices. But alcohol is one of those things that, I think there was never enough conversation around how harmful it really is. Mm-hmm. And for those of us who are healthcare practitioners, we actually see the statistics are pretty staggering around doctors, nurses, other types of healthcare practitioners, and their rates of alcohol abuse, because the stress is really high, the job is really stressful, and it's another coping mechanism, right? We kind of learned early on that alcohol could help support in those stressful times, maybe in college, and that behavior continued on. And so when I got sober, in my early kind of first couple of weeks, I used some of the tools that I had written about in that textbook chapter. I was utilizing some supplements. One of the things that I promote a lot today, L-glutamine, which is an amino acid that can help with alcohol cravings and sugar cravings. That I remember specifically a day that like I was ready to pick up a drink, and I took the L-glutamine and it got me through the craving. And whether it was really the L-glutamine or not, it got me through it. And I'm very grateful for that. And so, like I said, I was about 3 months sober, and I was like shocked that no one was really talking about this connection with nutrition and the importance of addressing some of these other key systems, looking at nutrient deficiencies, looking at the brain and how the brain is working, looking at the gut and hormones and how all those other pieces are affected by heavy alcohol use. And so, the pieces all really fell together. I share this in my story too, that removing alcohol was this huge, it was like opening the gate to a door that I didn't even know existed, right? And my life continued to kind of like all fall together, including this book, which is something that I had wanted to do for years. So I always share that story because if anyone's listening and they are early on that journey and they're maybe feeling frustrated or feeling like they're not sure if this is the right path for them, to just kind of hold on through the hard parts, because there's some really, really amazing, amazing, beautiful stuff beyond your wildest dreams that can happen when you're sober.
Yes. And you highlight that so well. And it's true. I mean, I like to think of it as creating space. Like when we remove alcohol, suddenly there is this space where we can choose to lean in and try new things. And I mean, you have created not only a book that's now out in the world, or soon to be out in the world, but you also have a network, a community component to your programs that you offer. You offer support in groups and individually for people who are early on in their sobriety journey. And so you have just proven, like so many entrepreneurs that I meet in this sober space, that wow, these ideas were dormant. They were there. The roots of the ideas maybe were there, but we just, alcohol was getting in the way. And it's so cool to see someone like yourself honoring that ability now, like, oh, I have this idea, I could do this, I have this offering, I want to move forward. And it has, I think it's part of the reason that the sober curious movement is growing so quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. We're now seeing a lot of interest from the wellness community, which I think we knew we were going to move in that direction. And that's been a big part of my goal, is to move this more into being a health and wellness topic rather than just something for people who identify as having an alcohol use disorder or having a drinking problem. Right. And I hate using that word problem, but I use it in the sense that, for so long, we reserved these conversations of sobriety for people who were willing to admit that they were out of control with alcohol. And I was just on another call earlier, and this is the conversation now, is you don't need to have a problem with alcohol to decide that you want to quit drinking. And the other thing I've been speaking a lot about recently that most people don't think about is that you don't have to be drinking alcohol every single day for alcohol to be affecting your life every single day, right?
Yeah.
So you don't have to be drinking 7 days a week for you to still have energy effects from alcohol, hormone imbalances, cortisol imbalances, GI issues, all of these ways that alcohol is extremely disruptive to our body. And that's a lot of what I talk about in the book. In part 2 of the book, I get into a lot of the science and these areas that, like you said, Terry, they were all like, this research isn't brand new, things on how alcohol affects the gut and how alcohol affects hormones, but no one has collaborated it or compiled it in this kind of approach. And so my goal as a practitioner, but also as an innovator, because that's been another big part of my passion too, is innovation. And when I left clinical practice in 2017 and started working in startup organizations, like I really loved how we start to come up with new approaches or new tools or new products that can support people in ways that like a clinician knows how to do, but bring it to a broader scale, right? So it's been so cool. And starting my network and my community, I mean, that's been one of the biggest, the most rewarding things for me. I have women all around the world, in many different countries. I think we're in 7 or 8 countries at this time. And we have just a variety of people of different backgrounds, and people who are early on their sobriety journey, people who are coming in and not really sure how they want to proceed quite yet. But we get into groups, we get onto live calls, we have daily content. There's tons of content and tools in there to support our members. And it's just been so amazing to see people walk through their journey from this path of wellness and nutrition and use that as a way into the reason and why they're doing this. It doesn't have to be because you hit a rock bottom or you feel like, your life was out of control. It could be, I just don't want to feel this way anymore. And I want to make a change because I get to.
Yes. Yeah, I get to. And as you were talking, Dr. Brooke, I was thinking, oh, it's kind of like saying, oh, I don't have diabetes, therefore I don't need to give up. I don't have to give up processed foods, or I won't give up processed foods. And if you put it in that context, it's kind of ridiculous. Like, we know processed foods are bad for us. We know they're going to have a cumulative effect. And so most people are aware that we need to cut back on processed foods. They're not waiting until they get a scary diagnosis. But with alcohol, we are often in that place. Society tells us that we'll just drink responsibly or just moderate. And we almost don't have permission. And I think that's changing, to take a step back and say, and people used to ask me, a few times people have said, well, did you have a problem with alcohol? And I said, well, it was a problem for me. I felt terrible. I didn't like it. And, it's a really interesting shift in the conversation.
And that's all it needs to be. Like, all you need to decide is that this is affecting your life negatively and that you want to try something different. We have been completely misled as a society around alcohol and its true health impacts. I really believe that we are going to continue seeing massive shifts in this. We're seeing the research now all coming out to refute any of those previous kind of quote unquote benefits from alcohol. We're seeing large governmental organizations like the World Health Organization making statements that say no amount of alcohol is safe for consumption. And another thing that a lot of people don't know is that, or maybe you've heard, alcohol is what we call a class 1 carcinogen. It's on this list of substances that are known to cause cancer in humans. And people hear that and they go, oh, okay, yeah, whatever. But what most people don't know is what else is on that list are things like tobacco and asbestos and radiation. And would we take in a little bit of radiation because we think it might have benefit for our health? No, we wouldn't. We know that that is a dangerous, harmful substance. We wouldn't be like having small amounts of it. And so alcohol classified as a similar type of substance, and yet we're still kind of leading the public to believe that it is safe, even at low levels. And the challenge is that how many of us are really drinking at really low levels? Because what we see now is maybe more like 2 glasses a week is the threshold rather than 2 glasses or 2 drinks a day. And anything over that 2 glasses or a couple of glasses a week is going to have significant impacts on health risk. And so a lot of people aren't aware of that. No. And so we need to educate people and let them know that this isn't just a null substance that you consume and you get a hangover and no big deal. That hangover that we feel is the after effect of our body being poisoned. In fact, I always like to share this, that alcohol itself, the reason why we feel drunk when we consume it is because it's poisoning our nervous system. So that drunk, that giddy feeling that we feel, that dizziness that we feel, that is the effect of our body being poisoned. And I say that not to scare you or not to promote fear, but to share that that's the reality of what's happening when we drink it.
Yeah, well, and I think about the idea that I was one of those people who I'm smaller in stature. And so I would drink and I would get pretty sick, and I often would vomit. And when I realized oh, I am vomiting or passing out so that I don't consume so much alcohol that I die. It was what other, if you and I went out to dinner together and we ate something and I went home and vomited, I'd be like, oh, I'm not eating that again. But yet I would go out with you.
Say, I have food poisoning.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. We don't come home after throwing up one night and say, oh yeah, I had alcohol poisoning. No, we reserve that for when you're in the hospital and getting your stomach pumped and it's this extreme thing. Mm-hmm. But it's really not. I mean, it's the way that as a society we have led our people to believe, and we do this through advertising. We do this through promoting it on TV and in movies, and and it's become so socially acceptable that having this big conversation now about changing alcohol behaviors is shaking a lot of people up, and it's shaking up the industry in a lot of ways too. We just a week or so before we're recording this is when White Claw released that 0% White Claw, which when I saw it was really, it really gave me a giggle because, as we all know, we've all been drinking seltzer water this whole time in sobriety. Yes. I don't know who's buying 0% White Claw, but I guess we'll see how it goes. I'm happy to see that the industry is changing, right? There's obviously a huge need for these. We're seeing major increases in this, but there is still a need for this education portion.
Yeah. And here's what I love about the work that you're doing is that you are educating people, but you're not leaving them with knowledge. You're actually now saying, because, somebody might be listening to this and think, oh, crap, I better take a look at my drinking. But you're actually saying, so here is some targeted steps that you can take, and an approach that is going to honor your body's healing process and is going to be helpful. And so let's talk about what some of those steps are. I highlighted or dog-eared a bunch of places in your book. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't think we have time to talk about all this. But what I think is really powerful is just starting with when we eat.
Mhm.
Like that alone can be such a huge benefit to people in those early days of cravings. So would you walk us through some of these practical tips?
Yeah, I would love to. And, we're already eating somewhere around 3 times a day, right? So it's not like this is something that you have to make a whole bunch of changes or that you need to go out and buy a bunch of new stuff to try. It's really making adjustments to what you're currently eating and making it something that's easy to implement and not necessarily another barrier to change. So one of the questions I get a lot is, well, I'm already doing this really hard thing. Should I really be like trying to add in, this other thing on top of it? And it's I point that out because I want people to know that it isn't a major lifestyle overhaul that this requires. There's some really super simple things that you can do that can really make a big difference when it comes to overcoming cravings, when it comes to managing stress levels, when it comes to starting to heal the body and recover and repair some of these systems that have been affected by long-term alcohol use. Especially if you were a heavier drinker, when you quit, you usually feel a little crappy before you start to feel better. And that can be really frustrating for people, right? But what that tells me, if you've maybe taken a couple of weeks off or a month off, or maybe you're 2 months off alcohol and you still feel low mood or low energy and you're still not really feeling great, that tells me that nutrition is a tool that you will benefit from, because what happens from long-term alcohol use is it causes these disruptions in many, many different areas of our body. One of the areas that I speak a lot about is blood sugar. And alcohol has a pretty significant effect on our blood sugar, not only when we're drinking it, but also long term, right? And people with a heavy drinking history tend toward hypoglycemia, or what we call low blood sugar, meaning that we're more likely to slip into a state of low blood sugar than someone else might. And what that means is that if we go long periods of time without eating, we get that feeling, that hangry feeling that most people can relate to. The Snickers bar commercial, example of you're really irritable, you're getting tired, maybe you're getting a headache, you're lethargic, and that can be um, solved by consuming or having something to eat. And one of my biggest recommendations for people, and super simple, is just increasing your protein intake throughout the day. That is my number one recommendation across the board. And it seems so simple, but I have seen this work with hundreds of clients. It works. It works for me. I've seen it work for many, many other people. And what we're doing when we're having more protein throughout the day is we're stabilizing that blood sugar. So those of us who have this tendency to fall into hypoglycemia or low blood sugar, that low blood sugar can also be a contributor to things like cravings for alcohol and cravings for sugar. And I'll bring this up. A great example is most people get that craving to drink at the afternoon witching hour, right? 5 o'clock, 4 or 5, 6 o'clock, getting home from work, stress is high. We want that, like hit of something feel good to make us feel better, right? And my first question to people is always, well, when was the last time you ate? Because oftentimes it's lunch, which was 4, 5, 6 hours ago, maybe. Maybe they had an afternoon snack, but it was something sweet and carby. And what happens is, again, we're slipping into that low blood sugar state. And most people can solve that afternoon craving time by simply having something to eat at that time. High in protein, maybe some fiber, some healthy fats, and having at least 15, 20 grams of protein at that time can really, really take away a craving in a semi-miraculous way. And I say that because, for so many people who have really struggled during that time and felt like that was kind of the the thing that kept them stuck in the drinking cycle, it can be really, really life-changing to start to add in and incorporate that snack. So I am a big proponent of protein every 3 to 4 hours, and the most important snack being that afternoon snack. So again, these are things that doesn't require a lot of special stuff. A lot of it is just small tweaks and maybe things that you're already having an afternoon snack, but it's making a tweak to that afternoon snack.
Yeah, thank you for that. I actually, after we had our first podcast talk, I started strategically implementing this with my clients, and particularly those that were working remotely. So they were working, they weren't working at home. And I would say, before you leave your desk, you need to eat a high protein snack. And it made so much difference. I was like, bingo, here we go. Such a simple strategy. So yeah, that's so good.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that your clients are benefiting from it. It was something that I kind of came to a conclusion on in working with a client early on and when I had started my groups. And this was probably the end of 2021, or maybe it was dry January in 2022. And I had this one client who came to me and said, I have my afternoon wine because it gives me energy to get through the rest of the day. And I'm going, energy? That's interesting. I think she's just hungry.
Mhm.
And, because what she was really experiencing was that it gave her a little bit of a boost for a little while, but then she would crash again because she was still hungry. She still hadn't eaten. And she's now like, starting to feel a little funny from the wine. So the wine was not a true solution, but the snack was in
Yeah.
terms of getting through the rest of the day. Yeah.
Yeah. And so keep going, because you have some other really great, simple approaches. And you talk a little bit about some targeted supplements that I always, share with clients as well, because why not get the most tools? Why make it harder, right? If your body is deficient in things like magnesium and zinc and B12, let's support what the body needs to continue to do the hard work of repairing.
Yeah, and if we rely solely on food, it can sometimes take longer. And one thing that we didn't touch too much on, but we kind of alluded to, is that one of the pretty significant effects from alcohol, and this is something we've known for a long time. This isn't new research, but is the way that alcohol affects our nutrient status. So it lowers most of our important vitamins and minerals. So all of our B vitamins, including B12, folate. B1 is kind of the common one that we hear, but really the entire B complex is affected. Zinc, magnesium, iron. And what's really interesting about all of these nutrients is that we'll use magnesium, for example. Magnesium is our body's relaxing mineral. If we're deficient in magnesium, we have trouble unwinding, we have trouble sleeping, we have trouble coping and managing stress. And what do we use alcohol for? Those exact things, right? So, what we do is we drink, we lower our magnesium, our body can't naturally relax itself, and then we drink, and it creates this kind of vicious cycle. And that cycle happens with a lot of other nutrients. So, for example, the B vitamins, things like B12 and B6 and folate are really important for our brain's neurotransmitter development. So things like serotonin and dopamine. If we're not getting enough of those B vitamins, we are not effectively producing serotonin and dopamine. Well, what do? We drink because we have low mood. And then again, we continue depleting out these nutrients. So when we take the alcohol away, sure, we can start to bring foods in that can support these areas. And some of the foods that I love, I mean, I'm a huge promoter of fruits and veggies. So some of my favorites are beets. Beets are one of like my go-to. There's a ton of beet recipes in here because I get all of my clients eating beets. But beets are rich in a lot of these B vitamins. They're really good for the liver. They also help with oxygenation to the brain, so getting more blood flow to the brain, which helps with energy and focus. So I'm actually a big proponent of having beets for breakfast. And
Yes.
people kind of giggle at that. There's a recipe, Dr. Brooks' famous chocolate cherry beet smoothie is one of my
Awesome.
breakfast smoothie recipes. It's really, really helpful for promoting morning energy, but also things like cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, kale. Those are high in vitamin C. A lot of them have magnesium and some of the other B vitamins, but they're also good for promoting liver health and supporting the digestive system and feeding our good buggies in our gut, in our gut microbiome. And so, yeah, again, a lot of it is just kind of strategizing which foods to eat, but supplementation can be helpful. And one of the things that I recommend to almost all of my clients across the board is a B vitamin complex. And I typically recommend a methylated B vitamin complex, which I talk about in the book. And that is just simply because it is, there's a few forms of vitamins in a methylated complex that are a little bit easier for the body to absorb. And there are some genetics that can affect how we absorb B vitamins. So I always like a methyl B complex, and that is going to really help with supporting the energy repair systems, so kind of overall cellular health, but also things like mood, which again are critical for things like, when we are in this recovery period.
Yeah, and you make a really good point that if we're not feeling good after anywhere from maybe 3 weeks on, it's really important to, dig a little deeper, because, we can be just so disconnected from our body and the signals that our body is giving us around hunger, sleep, mood, emotions. And then, suddenly we're not feeling as good, but we don't even know, we're out of practice of putting connecting the dots. And so it's really helpful to get some lab work, perhaps check in with your practitioner and start to create a plan, because once alcohol is out of your system, your body works very quickly to start the repair. And so if you're not feeling good, you should be feeling good. Like Dr. Brooke and I are here to say, we want you to stop drinking alcohol and feel better than you've ever felt, right? And so if that's not you, then it's okay. Don't say, oh, I might as well drink, or it's not working for me. Just dig a little deeper.
Totally. And you bring up a great point. As a doctor of nutrition, when I work with clients, my first go-to is I'm running blood testing on everyone, and I'm looking at these nutrients, because these aren't things that are necessarily run when you go to your doctor for your yearly physical, right? Unfortunately, sometimes I have clients even have a hard time getting something like a vitamin D test done by their primary care physician, which is pretty standard nowadays to ask for and to get that information. Vitamin D is another one that's affected by alcohol, and can play a really big role in mood and mental health, immune system health, and even warding off things like autoimmunity. And so it's really important to know these levels in your body so that you can specifically support these areas. And part of my work, I do a little bit of one-on-one client work, but of course it's there's only one of me, and that's part of why I have the online programs that I have, because you can actually come into my online course, the Functional Sobriety Academy, learn more of these practices kind of in a hands-on manner via videos, audio trainings, etc. But you can also do lab testing there through my accounts, so you can actually have your lab testing done through me, and then get your results and see, are you deficient in these certain areas? And it's so interesting too, because I have clients sometimes come back with deficiencies in really strange nutrients, like you wouldn't necessarily, we hear, oh, well, you get enough of all of these B vitamins and niacin and B6 and zinc, and you would be surprised when you get your lab work back what you do find. And again, these aren't things that your normal doctor is testing for. So sometimes I have clients come in and say, oh, well, my doctor said my blood work looked fine. And that's usually because they run about three panels that give a very broad look at your body to make sure that you're not dying immediately.
Yeah.
And, but it's not, those tests aren't meant to optimize your health. They're meant to make sure that there's no like major core things happening immediately.
Yeah, I recently had a health diagnosis that I'm working with a naturopath, and it's really fascinating to, have the targeted approach around all of the range of labs and food sensitivities, and it's been a fascinating and really helpful journey. So yeah. I totally recommend what you're saying there, Dr. Brooks. So, in addition to talking about food, what I love about the book is that you've got this holistic approach around, let's talk about movement. Let's talk about lifestyle. Let's talk about community. Let's talk about your future. And so, tell us about that. Like, what was behind that philosophy in the book.
Yeah, well, anytime wellness is part of the discussion, nutrition is such an important part of that. And I think nutrition is a at least 70% of lifestyle, the importance in terms of lifestyle. But let's not leave out things like exercise, which we know are really beneficial, especially in recovery. They're really beneficial for improving mood, supporting brain health and cognition. But also, these are all tools that we can use when, just like we said earlier on in the discussion, when you now have all of this spare time that you didn't have before, right? That you're waking up in the morning not feeling maybe groggy or hungover, and now maybe you do want to go out and move, or you have the ability to, or the time to go ahead and do that. And incorporating in things like meditation and spirituality, those are, well known in a lot of recovery circles to be really beneficial and pillars of certain sobriety and recovery programs. But community is key. And I would have never written this book without talking about community, because community was so important for me and is for so many. And it's part of the reason why I started a community, because we, especially women, really thrive in community. And it's really hard to do this alone. And I was just on a call earlier where I made this example, and I'm really enjoying it. So I'm going to use it again. In that, if you're trying to change your nutrition or your food habits, if you're still going to the restaurants that only serve fried foods, it's going to make it really hard to eat healthier, right? It's the same thing with the people and the social circles that we surround ourselves with in sobriety. If we continue to go and sit around at a bar with our friends, it's going to be really hard to quit drinking if we continue putting ourselves in that same environment, right? And it's one of the barriers that keeps people from exploring sobriety is not knowing other people who are doing this, not knowing what to do, not wanting to have to make new friends or to have to let go of old friends or old relationships. But community is something that I believe is really additive. It's something that you add in when you're beginning this journey, and you see how it kind of starts to like ripple outward into the rest of your life. And just by finding a couple of people, and it doesn't have to be, a sobriety community, an online, an online group. AA is I think what sits behind a lot of the justification of why communities are so beneficial. Part of the research behind why AA has been as successful as it is has to do with the community aspect of it, and how you basically create these new relationships, mentorships, et cetera, that are influencing your behaviors moving forward. And so we don't need to necessarily go to AA to do that, but we can do that in other ways. So there's so many communities that have popped up in the last couple of years, ones that are supportive to women, ones that are supportive to moms, ones that, like mine, for example, is focused on nutrition and wellness as kind of the core pillar of that. And there's so many ways to kind of get involved. There's apps, there's, all these different things. There's more opportunities and options than ever before. But even finding, friends around you who don't drink, or rekindling a friendship with someone who you lost touch with because they don't drink, and because maybe you were spending more time with other people. So one of my recommendations in the book in the beginning is like, just connect with one or two people who don't drink. Like, let's start by that. You don't have to dive into community, but maybe find a friend or a family member or a coworker who doesn't drink, and just start spending more time with these people and allow that to kind of influence you. Because when we are, again, surrounded by people who drank like we did and we don't want to do that anymore, it's hard to be the only one who's changing your behaviors, right? So it is all about this holistic approach. It's not just a one-sided thing. And that's again where the nutrition plays such a big role for me, is like a lot of what exists today is around community, and it's around addressing the mental health side of things. It's around addressing traumas and supporting behavior change and those types of things. But there's this whole physiology element, the body, the biochemistry, that is really ripe for discussion. And so that's why I'm so excited about this book and its potential to really help support people from that angle.
Yeah, me too. I'm very excited about it. So to circle back what you said about community, I think it's so fascinating that we have so many options now. And I love that you pointed out it doesn't necessarily have to be a sobriety group, because for me, when I stopped drinking in 2016, or 2015, what I did in 2016, early 2016, I went to nutrition school, and those became my people. Now, that's not to say that they were all not drinking, because that was kind of an eye-opening experience. Like, I thought, oh, these are my wellness friends. Yeah.
Just like me, I was your wellness friend who was drinking a bottle of wine a night.
Yeah. And so, but what it did give me was it gave me a different perspective. It gave me people who what we had in common was not drinking. What we had in common was learning and wellness. And I recently I have a group for women after alcohol called the Self Experience. And we were having a conversation, and I said, well, we were talking about friendship. So where have you made friends in this after alcohol place? And one woman was saying, I don't really have what I call identify as sober friends. She goes, but I belong to a sailing club and a hiking club. And that's where she hangs out with the people. Like when they're sailing, they're not drinking, they are racing and their hands are busy. And so there are so many ways to connect with people where drinking is not the focus. Yeah. And it doesn't have to look like the traditional model of a recovery community. And I think that is a way to open doors for many people into this additive experience that you talk about.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's so many opportunities. We don't have to think of it as this one-sided or one-dimensional approach anymore, that we've come a long way, even in the last 2 years in this discussion. I mean, in 5 years, massive, but even in 2 years, there's so many different ways to explore this. It's not a one-size-fits-all anymore, and that's okay, and that's the benefit. Again, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning, that you don't have to identify as having a problem. You just have to identify with finding maybe people who are a little bit more in alignment with where you want to go.
Yes. Okay. So I want to switch gears for a minute, because I want to ask you about a topic in your book that comes up in my practice or my work with clients. And I don't know that people have really talked about it much before. So you talk a little bit about some of the medications that are out there for people looking to have medically assisted support around not drinking. So we're talking naltrexone, antabuse. I'm forgetting the name of the other one, but can you kind of share your philosophy around that?
Yeah. And we're also just coming off of a recent media discussion around Ozempic and using Ozempic for alcohol, reducing alcohol cravings and changing alcohol behaviors. And, I think we live in a society where we all want a quick fix, and we're always looking for a magic pill that's going to solve all of our problems and not have to do any of the hard work. And not to say that these medications are not extremely useful, and in some situations are really, really helpful and really are life-saving. So we need these medications to be a part of the conversation. But the medications themselves or the medications alone are not necessarily the solution, right? We need this holistic approach. We need this more well-rounded approach. And something like naltrexone, for example, I've had clients who have used it and have had a ton of success, and it's been great in helping them navigate a sobriety, their sobriety journey, and in getting off of alcohol in its entirety. Where my opinion starts to shift is where some of the discussion around it is about, how do I use this to moderate my alcohol, or to kind of game the system, if you will, in that, can I use this medication and still drink and still get around maybe some of my dysfunctional behaviors? Whereas there's multiple ways to be using these. Things like I get a little bit more fired up in discussions on something like Ozempic, which there's a lot of controversy over this medication right now and how harmful it can be, and that we don't know the long-term effects of these types of things. Ozempic is a weight loss medication that I've been working with some clients who have taken it, and it's really affecting their ability to eat, to consume enough nutrients. They're not getting enough protein. There's a lot of muscle wasting that's happening. So these medications all have side effects, and that's important to consider too. And so when you're considering them as part of your sobriety experience, it's just important to remember that it's not just taking the medication and that being the, again, quote, magic pill to solve this, that it really is a full holistic lifestyle change that is important for making this transformation for the long term.
Yeah, thank you for that balanced answer. And that's why I wanted you to share, because I think that their information that is out there is really skewed or missing some of the importance of, why we might take it. And I agree with you that it can be an assisted part of our sobriety journey. But there is no magic pill, which is just the perfect way to say it, because we can't just change behavior and have long-term effects. We're going to need to change some of these, foundational, just like we do with nutrition. We have to change from the inside out. And this is the journey that's in front of us with alcohol. And as you and I know, it's a beautiful journey. There's so much growth and joy and incredible opportunities. And so rather than being afraid of making these changes, I see this book as a way to help people lean in.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll just point out about the medications, because I was just thinking as you were sharing that responses, it's important to talk with a doctor, speak with your doctor and get information as to what's best for you and your health situation, because nowadays too, there are some programs that allow you to get this medication kind of like through another organization where it's not necessarily your doctor who is prescribing it to you. So check with your healthcare practitioner, even if they aren't the one that's going to ultimately prescribe it. Check in with them and see what their opinion is based on them knowing you and knowing a little bit more about your case. I always think it's good to get a couple of opinions on these things. So
yeah, thank you for that, because I was kind of surprised to hear people talking about almost like a black market to find their naltrexone or their antabuse. And it was like, whoa, wait a moment. But here's the other part that comes up is that, unfortunately, I think the other wellness conversation we're not having is we've got to get this out of the shadow, because when I work with nurses or doctors, they're afraid to ask their doctor for a prescription to antabuse, for example, because it will go on their record and then they have to report it. And it's like, could we stop punishing people for working toward wellness? I think that's the next frontier. What do you think?
Yeah, I think things are really shifting, and the ship is turning. I was just talking to someone about this the other day. It's almost like the Titanic, right? Like you can't just spin the wheel and you're making a right turn. We're kind of at that trajectory of like, all right, we're starting to make these shifts and these changes. And it's really important that those of us who are speaking up about this and making more noise about it, for so long it was stay anonymous, stay quiet about, your history of substance use, stay quiet about, being in recovery, and don't share that journey with others. And while that has been beneficial for a lot of people, it's also, I think, skewed a lot of our perspective on alcohol use. And it's kept a lot of people probably in this drinking or dysfunctional drinking pattern because they don't want to go into Alcoholics Anonymous, for example. And we're starting to have these more public conversations around alcohol. We're starting to see these things change. And I really do think that within the next 2 years, and by far within the next 5 years, we're going to be seeing really big shifts in this conversation of alcohol as part of our societal kind of norm.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And it is, again, as you mentioned at the beginning, it is a wellness conversation. We get to do this because we want to thrive as we go through life, not because we have a disease or we have an addiction issue. And it's just such a refreshing way to frame this. And it's so hopeful.
Yeah. I hope that it feels hopeful for those who are listening because I really do think we are in like really on the edge of a massive change. And I think that people who are making this choice now to eliminate alcohol are on the forefront of this big change. And that we might see, 10 years from now that the numbers around alcohol are halved. We're seeing this younger generation not being as interested in alcohol. And we're seeing really this wellness conversation start to encompass this, some big influential people in the health and wellness space starting to talk about it. And that's the kind of change that we really need.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Tell people where they can find you, connect with you, get your book, and all the goodies.
Yeah, so you could buy or pick up your copy of How to Eat to Change How You Drink wherever books are sold. You can get it on Kindle, you can get it on Audible. If you get it on Audible, you'll hear me reading it to you.
That's
Which is
awesome.
the part. But wherever books are sold, and then you can learn more about me at functionalsobriety.com, which is where you can also learn more about my online programs. And I'm most active on social media on Instagram at Dr. Brooke Scheller. And you'll find lots of tips and tricks there and a lot of the things that we talked about here today that you can kind of pepper into your daily readings on social media.
Oh, that's so good. And what is next for you?
Well, that's a good question. The book is the day that we're recording this, the book has not come out yet. So what's next for me is this book coming out and everything going smoothly. I am going on a book tour. So I have some stops that I will be traveling to in January, February, and probably early into March. And then after that, I do really hope to write another book. I hope to write kind of a second part of this that is on kind of the next piece of it for me. So I won't give too much away, but
Yeah. Well, and I'm hoping that you're going to put out a course for other wellness professionals to talk to their clients about alcohol, because that's where I was in 2016. I thought, well, this is what the world needs. And then in 2019, as a brand new sober coach, I was like, I'm going to talk to wellness professionals. And they were like, we're not interested. And so I think we just need more of that.
Yeah. Yeah, there is in the works some movement toward a course on functional sobriety and helping other nutrition and wellness professionals to incorporate that into their practice so that there is more people who are able to support their clients who are maybe struggling or need some support with alcohol reduction.
Awesome. I love that. Well, thank you so much for being here today. As always, such a pleasure to hang out with you.
You too, Terry. Thank you.
I want to thank you for tuning in to the Sober Edge podcast. This is a place for important conversations and a safe place to question everything you thought you knew about drinking. If you're looking for your sober edge, I want to invite you to connect with me at thesobernutritionist.com, where you can grab my free resource, Becoming More, a guide to loving your sober life. And I would be so grateful if you enjoyed this podcast, if you would leave a rating and review, as it will help more people find their sober edge.